Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. Today's video will be my March and April wrap up. I read a total of 11 books in the last 2 months. I had 7 books in March and 4 books in April. I did have 3 rereads. I had 2 books that I DNF'd, and so far I'm 2 for 2 with my TBR jar picks. I obviously had a pick in March and April and I read both of those, so I'm on track to keep up with that challenge. I will say also rating wise, it wasn't the greatest. I kind of had a lot of 2 and 3 star reads, which definitely sucks. I only had like 1 4-star, and then I had a couple 5 stars, which were my rereads. But for the most part, everything else was kind of a low rating. I just was not enjoying a lot of what I was reading. And obviously I DNF'd 2 books. So yeah, it just wasn't the greatest, but I feel like May is going to be a better month for me, and then I do have a lot of summer reading plans, which I will eventually do a summer reading plans video for, but let's get on to the wrap up. So we're going to start with March 1st, which I read 7 books. If I'm looking down, it's because I'm referencing my reading journal, which has been going very well, by the way. I've been keeping up with this and I'm loving it. The first book I read in March was Swift and Saddled by Layla Sage. This is the second book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series, and this I gave 4 out of 5 stars. Ada Hart is in Meadowlark to work on an interior design project for a bed and breakfast at Rebel Blue Ranch, but her first night there, she has an intense interaction with a handsome cowboy who turns out to be her new boss, Weston Ryder. I really liked this. I really liked both characters. I loved their slow burn romance. I love how Wes fell first. He was pretty much in love with her the night that he met her, and he was just obsessed with her, and I loved that. I loved how Ada got to build a friendship with all of the other women in the series, and she finally felt like she had friends for the first time in her life, and I loved that little relationship that was happening. I think I just really love this series because it reminds me a lot of my childhood, and it reminds me of me growing up on a farm, and it makes me feel very nostalgic. And I think because these books are so short, they're just sweet and to the point, which I really enjoy. I will say because it is so short, it does feel a little difficult to fully connect to the characters and fully fall in love with them, but I still really enjoyed this book regardless, and I just loved the farm, small town vibes. It was just a very quick, cute, and wholesome read, and I'm very excited for the next 2 books in the series. And then we have my rereads, which was a series that I reread, and I did actually vlog the entire thing, so I will link the vlog down below, but I reread the entire Monster in His Eyes trilogy by J.M. Darhower. This is one of my favorite series of all time, so of course I did give each book 5 out of 5 stars. This was also my 3rd time reading the series, but I had a blast. I love this series so much, and I loved the vlog that I filmed for it. It is spoiler free, so I highly recommend you watch that video if you want to see some of my reactions and just my spoiler-free thoughts and opinions. So the first book is Monster in His Eyes. The second book is Torture to Her Soul. And then the third book is Target on Our Backs. This whole series follows one couple, and it essentially follows Carissa Reed, who is a college student, and she forgets her phone in class one day, and she's about to go grab it, but she overhears a intriguing conversation between her professor and this mysterious man named Ignazio. And Ignazio does spot her during this very suspicious conversation, and they have a very intense encounter, and suddenly Naz is everywhere and determined to court Carissa. It is a dark romance. The first book is in Carissa's point of view, the second book is in Naz's point of view, and then the third book is in both of their point of views. This series is just very interesting, very unique. I love the romance. I love the characters. Naz is one of my favorite heroes of all time. I absolutely love him. I finally annotated this series. This was the first time that I got to annotate it, and I had so much fun rereading these books and annotating them, and I highly, highly recommend this series. It's truly one of the best dark romances I have ever read. It's nothing too dark. It's definitely like easy to read, easy to stomach. It's more mystery focused than anything else, I would say. Like, it has a heavy mystery plot and there is some dark stuff happening, but it's nothing crazy. I just love these characters and I love the whole journey that they all go on, and I love their character development as well throughout the whole series. I just love these books, highly recommend them, and I highly suggest that you watch my vlog. Then we get on to my first TBR jar pick of the year, and that is Acts of Desperation by Megan Nolan. This I gave 2 out of 5 stars. The unnamed narrator meets a magnetic writer named Kieran, which begins a spiral of love, jealousy, obsession, heartbreak, and the pain of self-discovery. This is obviously not my typical type of book that I would read. Obviously, I love romance, but I occasionally like to dabble in literary fiction or other things similar to this, and I had heard really good things about this, so I was very interested, but obviously I just didn't really enjoy it. I enjoyed the writing style and I enjoyed the short chapters. I enjoyed kind of how the story was built. The story itself was interesting and I did want to keep reading, and obviously I did finish the entire book, but at the same time I also just didn't really care. I couldn't really relate to the female character. I did feel bad for her and I totally understand like what she was going through, but also at the same time all I could think of was that she should have just went to therapy and just dealt with everything, talking about her feelings and like getting actual help, which I know is not the point of the book, but that was just how I felt the entire time I was reading this. There were some powerful moments in here. Other than that, it just wasn't really for me. The next 2 books that I read, I did also vlog, so I will link that video down below. If you don't want to be spoiled on the vlog, I read the lowest and highest rated book on my TBR. So the first one I read was Angelica Frankenstein Makes Her Match by Sally Thorne. This I gave 2 out of 5 stars, and this follows Angelica, who has run out of suitors and fears she may be running out of time. While assisting her brother Victor on experiments to bring reassembled men back to life, Angelica decides to take matters into her own hands to create her perfect match. And resurrected Will wants nothing to do with romance but to find answers on who he really is. This was a very weird book, and obviously I gave it 2 stars, so I didn't really enjoy it. There were aspects that I liked, like the setting and the vibe. It was a gothic Victorian horror type book. It was very like autumnal vibes, spooky, which I enjoyed. Angelica and Victor had a very strange sibling relationship that I didn't really enjoy, and there was a lot of inappropriate sexual talk about Will and his like new body, I guess, and it just made me really uncomfortable. I felt so bad for Will. He truly just wanted to find out like who he was or like what his life was like before he died and then got all these new body parts. It also kind of felt like Angelica was forcing him to love her. Like she was always pressuring him to just love her because she essentially brought him back to life and she's paying for everything and he's living in their house and she's rich, and it just felt very weird. I did really enjoy the ending though. I liked the kind of like found family moment, and the climax of the story was really interesting and I kind of teared up kind of towards that part. So I did enjoy the ending, but a majority of the book I just felt really uncomfortable by. And then the other book that was in that same vlog was Chain of Gold by Cassandra Clare. This is the first book in the Last Hours trilogy, and this I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I think this is the 4th Shadowhunter series, and this one takes place after the Infernal Devices. So this kind of continues that storyline, I guess. Cordelia Carstairs, a shadow hunter, moves to London with her family after her dad is accused of a crime. Cordelia reunites with James and Lucy Herondale, her childhood friends, as they start to uncover a mystery surrounding strange demon attacks. This is honestly one of my least favorite Shadowhunter books, which is shocking. I always love Cassandra Clare's books. I have never rated any of them lower than 4 stars. And this one I was just kind of disappointed with. It felt so similar to her other books. It didn't really feel that original or brand new. The characters just kind of felt like repeats of other characters that she's written before, and some of the storylines just felt very similar to her other storylines. I just didn't really feel like anything was super brand new. I, of course, love to see Will, Tessa, and Jem. It was so nice to see a little bit of them in here, and Magnus. I loved that. It's been so long since I've been into the Shadowhunter world that I was kind of mixing up like who was who and who was related to who. I did really like the main 4, I guess I would say, like Lucy, James, Cordelia, and Matthew. I really liked all of them, and I thought they were a great group of friends. I was shocked by some of the stuff that happened in here because I didn't really think that we would get stuff that happened, I guess. It was just a little shocking. I'm not really sure like who I ship yet and who I want to be together, because I feel like everybody kind of has a little bit of a fling with each other, or like a connection with each other, so I'm not really sure who I want to be together, but I'm going to continue the series because I do own the other books in the series, and even though I didn't love this, I still want to keep up with all the Shadowhunters and read about what happened to Will and Tessa's kids and Jem and all that kind of stuff. So I do want to keep reading the series, but yeah, I didn't love it. I'm definitely disappointed with this one. Then we get into the books that I read in April. So I did read 4 of them. The first one was If You Hate Me by Helena Hunting, which I gave a 3.5 out of 5 stars. After having a rough roommate situation, Rix moves in with her older brother and his best friend Tristan. Man-whore and hockey player Tristan has never gotten along with Rix, but the more they spend time in the same space, the more they believe they need to get over their attraction to each other. Will hooking up in secret to ruin everything or be the right move forward? I enjoyed the first half of this book. I was really into it. I couldn't stop reading. I really liked the characters and the slow burn aspect, and I liked how they slowly started hooking up with each other. There was a lot of miscommunication in this book, which I didn't really enjoy, and there were like 2 breakups that kind of just felt like back and forth a lot, and it was tiring to read about. And I thought at that point, when they were like getting back together and then breaking up, it just kind of dragged, and I felt like the book could have been over already. It was super addicting, and I did like the characters. Tristan did kind of annoy me because he just waited so long to admit his feelings, and it was very annoying. There were a lot of smutty scenes in here. There was one weird scene that kind of made me uncomfortable. I like how Rix had a positive impact on Tristan. He became a much more nicer, respectful guy, and he was over his like playboy moments, and he definitely became a better character and had like great character development. And he definitely encouraged Rix to chase her dreams and to fight more for what she wanted in her life. I definitely hated Rix's brother. He was awful. Like, she deserved a much better brother, and I'm glad that Tristan kind of stood up for her a lot. But I enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to read the second book in the series. I'm very excited for that one. But yeah, this was still a really fun, entertaining hockey romance. And then I read my TBR draw pick for April, which was Bitter Heat by Mia Knight. This is the first book in the Signed series, and this I also gave 3.5 out of 5 stars. A cruel twist of fate leaves Jasmine stranded in a remote cabin with her ex-husband James Roth, who she hasn't seen in 5 years. He isn't acting like the man she married, he's different. One night together kicks off a series of events that threatens Jasmine's freedom as Roth is on a path of revenge. This is somewhat of a dark romance. I would say it's more of like a mystery type of romance. This was a very intriguing read. I definitely could not stop reading it. The first, I would say like maybe 8 chapters were kind of slow, just getting into the story. But after that, I flew through this book and I ended up finishing the whole thing in like one sitting. This book was also very smutty, and at times I kind of skimmed a lot of the sex scenes just because was kind of bored, and I was like, can we just get on to the plot and like the story? I just felt like there was not enough story happening, and like there was a lot of suspense about like who Roth was as a character and like what was going on with him and like what his deal was and like what their past truly consisted of. But I always felt like anytime we got answers, there was like a sex scene that happened, and it just kind of dragged for me. I really like Jasmine, and I really enjoyed her complicated relationship with her family. I thought that was very interesting. I sadly just didn't love Roth. I think that was like my main issue with this book, is that we weren't really given a lot about him. He was very mysterious and very demanding, very in charge, very alpha male, which normally I would love, but I just felt like we weren't really given enough about Roth for me to care about him and love him, because he just kind of showed this like very demanding, controlling type of character, and I was kind of confused about the ending as well. And it does end on a cliffhanger, but I'm honestly not really that interested to read the second book. And I guess maybe if I read the second book, I would understand like his motives more and like why he's doing the things that he's doing. But to me, it just feels like his story of revenge just kind of fell flat. I liked the old money vibes in here, and I liked how Jasmine was an heiress, and I enjoyed Jasmine in general, but yeah, I just didn't really like the romance. I didn't really feel like there was much of a romance plot in here, and I just wasn't completely sold on Roth, unfortunately. Then I read Wild Love by Elsie Silver. This is the first book in the Rose Hill series, and this I gave 2.5 out of 5 stars. Ford Grant, a billionaire, moves back to Rose Hill to open his own recording studio, but his world is flipped upside down when a young girl claims he is her biological father. Rosie, his best friend's little sister, is back in town after quitting her job and tries to convince Ford to hire her. But after years of secretly pining for her, is working together a good idea. This was honestly just too long and boring. I liked Ford. I thought he was a very interesting character. He was kind of awkward, which I thought was very wholesome and unique. Rosie was all right. I kind of found her annoying, and honestly, I did not feel the chemistry between Rosie and Ford. I liked Cora. I really cared about her and her storyline, and I loved getting to see that side of Ford with Cora, him stepping up to be like a father figure. And anytime that Cora had a heart-to-heart moment with Ford or Rosie or any of the other characters, I definitely teared up. I thought Elsie Silver did a good job building that connection that Cora had with these other characters. It made me emotional every time I read about that. The third act breakup was kind of pointless. I do understand where Rosie was coming from, but in my opinion, it was pointless and unnecessary, and I just felt like Elsie Silver was adding to the page count at that point. This book definitely could have been 100 pages shorter. It did not need to be this long. It was so boring. I did like how Ford was in love with Rosie for 10 years, and he did all these secret things because he loved her. I did love that. I also feel like there really wasn't much of a plot anyways, and them building the recording studio was kind of boring and took way too much time. And I just didn't really care. So yeah, unfortunately, I didn't love this, and I'm not going to continue the series. Then I read When Gracie Met the Grump by Mariana Zapata. This I gave 2 out of 5 stars. This follows Gracie, who essentially is kind of living in the middle of nowhere, and this superhero ends up landing in her front yard, and he is suddenly drained of all of his powers, and Gracie decides to help him and nurse him back to health, but there's obviously a lot of questions as to why he landed in her front yard and why does he not have his powers and all of that jazz. I started this ages ago. I think I started it shortly after it had come out, and I ended up reading like maybe at that point like 50 pages, and then I put it down, and then I picked it back up sometime last year, and I got through like maybe 100 pages, 120 pages, I don't fully remember, and then it took me a couple days, but I ended up finishing it. The beginning was really interesting. It kind of picked up like right away. You got into some of the action. Then there was kind of a slow period, and then there was an action part, and then it kind of got slow again, and then we were kind of at the main like point of the story, if that makes sense. My biggest issue with this book is that it was just very slow and boring, and I did not feel like the hero loved Gracie at all until like maybe the last 5 chapters when he finally confessed his feelings. But even then, I didn't fully believe that he loved her. I just felt like he hated her pretty much the entire book. I understand why, but he essentially just was mean and rude to her the entire time, and it just really annoyed me. And I didn't feel the chemistry between them. I didn't feel their connection. I somewhat liked Gracie. She did kind of annoy me towards like the end of this book, where she constantly was telling everybody, oh, I'll pay you back. I'll pay you back. Like, once I get my money, once I get my ID, I'll pay you back. And she kept saying that over and over and over again. And it just annoyed the shit out of me. It's like, we get it, girl. You said it the first 2 times. I don't need to hear it another 10 times. This book would have worked if it was 200 pages shorter. But because Mariana Zapata loves to do a slow burn story, slow burn romance, I just feel like the story itself didn't work for this book. The whole superhero aspect was very interesting. I did like it, and I did want to keep reading because of that, but I don't feel like it worked for Mariana Zapata's storytelling and just the way that she writes. I don't feel like this type of story was for her. When we meet the hero's family, I definitely was confused on who was who and who was related to who. Like, it was kind of confusing with all these characters and all these names. I felt like the end was kind of not predictable, but it just felt very convenient. I will say I enjoyed the sex scene though. That was pretty good. But yeah, I didn't love this. I liked aspects, but yeah, I just was really disappointed with this one. But I will say I'm very happy and proud of myself for actually reading it. And then, like I said, I had 2 DNFs, so I'm going to go through that really quickly. So I did officially DNF Funny Feelings by Tara DeWitt. This I stopped reading at page 88. I think I started this around like October of last year, and I got through, I think, like 80 pages of it or 50 pages of it. Then I tried to read some more. Then I was kind of stuck on page 82, and I gave it another try. I gave it like a 3rd try, and I stopped at page 88, and I could not do it anymore. I really did not like the writing style. I personally am not a fan of books where our character is having a conversation with somebody, they're mid-conversation, and then the character has this insane long inner dialogue that kind of takes you out of the conversation scene with the characters. Because now we're inside their head and they're babbling about things that like don't make sense, that are not relating to anything. They're just like going on and on and on. And then you jump back into the conversation that they're having with another character, and it just kept happening in this book, and that really drove me crazy. I cannot deal with a bunch of inner dialogue while a conversation is happening between 2 characters. I also just felt like some of the sentences didn't really flow that well either, and yeah, I just wasn't a huge fan of the writing. I also didn't really love the heroine that much. So yeah, I just couldn't continue reading this. And this just follows, our heroine is a stand-up comedian, and the hero is a like former retired stand-up comedian, and he is a single dad, and he, I think, is basically like the heroine's manager, and they end up having to have a fake relationship to give press to the heroine, I think. And then the other book I officially DNF'd was Covet by Tracy Wolff. This is the 3rd book in the Crave series. I don't know what this series is called. Nope, it doesn't say what the series is called. This I started like 5 months ago, and I was really into it, but then I had put it down and I hadn't picked it back up. I decided I was going to try to see if I wanted to push through this, so I read an extra like 60 pages, and I just didn't really care. It was interesting, but I don't think I cared enough to continue the story. I don't really care about the characters that much. I don't really care about the romances, and I just realized I would be wasting my time continuing this because it is so massive for no reason. This book could definitely be a 300-page book and it would still make sense and still be fine. But unfortunately, it is like 800 pages for absolutely no reason. Actually, it's like 700 pages, but still. There's a lot of back and forth between the characters and the plot, and a lot of this could have been edited down. I really loved the first book. The second book I was kind of iffy on, and at that point I was excited to continue the series, but the longer I have been in the middle of this, the longer I've realized I don't care. I did DNF this at page 192, by the way, so I did give it a fair try. I did really give it my all, but I just could not continue. Like, I read pretty much like this much, and I'm not into it. This is a young adult paranormal about all of these creatures that go to this boarding school, and our female character has to figure out what she is, or like who she is essentially. And there's vampires, werewolves, witches, gargoyles, all that kind of stuff. It is very action-packed. It is very fun, but I just sadly don't care. So those were all 11 books that I read in the last 2 months. Let me know if you have read any of the books that I talked about and what you think about them, or let me know any of your recent reads. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.